Hello, this is Father Matthew Schneider. Welcome back to the Autistic Priest YouTube channel. And today I want to go over a little study that somebody did as their master's thesis. The person's name is Valerie Bowles at St. Francis University. And this young lady has sent me her master's thesis. And the master's thesis title is Understanding the Religious Experience of Children with Autism in the Catholic Church, an overview of contextual and behavioral factors. It is somewhat academic, but it is very interesting, is that it is one of the first studies where they went through and asked all these autistic children about their experience with religion, which is very interesting to me because I think a lot of times we can think, okay, let's talk to the parents about their children's experience, but also the children's experience themselves is valuable. If you read, for example, the work of Christian Smith, where he's talked to people, teenagers and in their 20s, about the religious experience, there's a value there that you can't get from talking to those who work with teenagers, from talking to parents. And I think in the same way, if they talk to children here, even though obviously children can't give you as detailed of responses, you do gain something valuable to learn for how we can present autism to others. So I'm just going to read a few lines from this and comment on it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a whole master's thesis. There's 23 pages of text followed by, the tables and bibliography and the questionnaire. I'll check with Valerie after I do this video, and if she wants it, maybe I'll put this online somewhere. And if I do, it will be down in the comments, down in the description below. So anyways, it's noted, she notes, that often in autobiographical essays or books written by autistics, spiritual themes emerge. Temple Grandin has spoken about this, and she has spoken about it kind of in a very, how to put it, abstract kind of way, that it's kind of just morality, a kind of way of living, and it's not a personal relationship. It doesn't seem as much for her. But I do think a lot of us do have those experiences, and I can tell you that people who have contacted me since I became public about being autistic as a Catholic priest have communicated that to me, that there are a lot of people out there who are autistic and have had great spiritual experiences. So, she continues on. I'm just flipping through the pages here because I did prepare this by reading through it and highlighting some things, but I don't remember exactly where I highlighted. So I just had to flip through to this page. She says, one of the trends identified by the interview that was not indicated in the general surveys is that frequently one parish in a large geographic area will host a faith formation program for children with disabilities. Other parishes around the area will send families to designated parish for faith formation. A limitation that the interviewee identified was that families sometimes feel as though they are not welcome at other churches or the church they have attended for years. And this is kind of a difficulty because on a certain level, we can't just all of a sudden provide every service at every parish. So sometimes things like this do have to be kind of combined so that we can have, maybe the autistic service here and the deaf service there. I know in DC here, there's one mass where every Sunday they have for the deaf, which has sign. It would be rather difficult or expensive to find sign language interpreters for every parish, for example, but that's a challenge, and I don't know the exact answer. I think sometimes if we can have an autistic mass and create an autistic community, that would even be better, because I do think, kind of like the deaf, in that we have a different way of communicating at times. Community among ourselves is sometimes valuable. So, and she mentions this, that the difficulty of volunteers and staff members who understand it, who are able to help. I mean, we don't have an unlimited budget. Parishes have limits on those things. So, but Valerie Bowles also indicates that there are some interesting positive things. She says that the frank and direct nature of children with autism has brought new insight, where she had several stories. Children with autism assume leadership roles, teaching the rest of the church vocabulary, sharing excitement for adoration, singing, serving mass, lecturing, praying. You know, I've known several autistics and they've been very excited about serving mass and things, and I served mass as a kid. I wasn't like the most excited about serving mass, to be honest. I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me, and she convinced me to serve mass when she was able to. I wasn't really excited about it before that, so I didn't. But I did serve and I did enjoy it. You know, so anyways, continuing on, is inclusion was a frequent theme, especially in reference to the sacraments. And I think before this video comes out, I should have a video that I just also recorded today on the Adaptive First Communion set published by Loyola Press, prepared by the Rizzo family, which I think is very helpful, and different things like that for the sacraments, because certain sacraments are particularly difficult. You know, communion I don't think is as much so. Confirmation, not as much so. But for example, confession, I can only imagine, you know, the challenges that somebody who is even a little more difficult with communication than I do, you know, has in confession. I just realized, you know, that I've had all these extra difficulties in confession my whole life that other people didn't have once I was diagnosed, because of those kind of emotional things and the lack of theory of mind and difficulties like that. And so fortunately I got through it without any accommodations, but I can see that there are a lot of accommodations that can happen. And honestly, when I send someone in the confessional who might be autistic, I try and make those accommodations myself, but obviously I'm going to be a little bit more ready to do that than others because I'm autistic and I'm like one of the few priests who's openly published and spoken in public forums about being autistic. So it's not that you know, I have a certain advantage and people would know me and things. So now going back to the accommodations, it notes here that only 20% reported there were accommodations present at the parish. 57% of these were individual adaptations, 14% were established for, and 27% said that they were sent to another parish. And so I think that those type of things are important, you know, how we adapt, whether it's one of the choir rooms or where we turn down the lights and the volume at one mass, or whether it's different things like that. I don't have, you know, magic bullet solution. And honestly, sometimes, especially for like a class, it might just have to be 2 or 3 parishes get together to do it together, as opposed to having 5 kids split across 3 parishes in that grade. Now it's very interesting that she has a figure here that I thought was very interesting. It's going to be, I'm going to try and show it on screen here, but it's a little difficult to see. So this is different factors: spontaneous, observant religious activities, communal religious activities, private religious expressions with prompts, and questioning behavior. And questioning behavior when asking questions about the faith. And so the black are the typical neurotypical, and the gray are the autistic. And 4 means they do it all the time, 0 means they rarely do it. So hopefully, if I can show this to the screen, you can see that, and you can notice that the gray is higher way on the 0, and the black is higher on the 4 in basically all of the categories. In all these different sets of behavior, they observe, from the parent's perspective, more of this behavior in typical, neurotypical than autistic children. But I'm wondering if there is an absolute predominance, or there are certain ways in which it is expressed different. And part of the reason I question whether this is an absolute or just observed from the parents, I think sometimes we autistics can not think in the same way as neurotypicals, and so it doesn't come across the same way to parents who are neurotypical. And I'll give you an example. One of the tests of creativity is they'll give you something like, in 30 seconds, write down as many animals as you can think of, or in a minute. Now the official test is just count the numbers, and you just say, you know, and autistics will tend to have a lower number than neurotypicals. But if you take it one step deeper and say, what animals did they list? Autistics tend to have some pretty creative answers for those animals, and so it's not necessarily that we don't have creativity, we just express it differently, you know, in that sense. Like, the neurotypical will say cat, dog, hamster, parrot, and the autistic will say iguana, crocodile, sloth, things like that are all random. And that is a certain different type of creativity. And the same way when the next a few paragraphs down, it talks about how the questions are. And I really wonder if we autistics will tend to ask questions in a different way, and maybe we might not question as much, but each question is more valuable, because we won't take just social nicety of the questions. We want deeper answers. Here we go into the most. I'm going to skip this page. I'll go back to this page afterwards. But here's the question. The 50% of the questions children on autism asked were more personal. Both the frequency of themes of personal questions asked by children with autism was different than their typical counterparts. Out of 3 personal questions asked by typically developed children, 2 asked if they were going to heaven or hell, and 1 asked about the validity of religion. All of the questions asked by children with autism, this is a quotation, so in case you're wondering about person first language here, were about their own suffering, such as a classmate's death, or perceived shortcomings of religion. 2 children asked why God did not answer their prayers, and 1 if God would be disappointed if he could not stay at Mass. Many of the questions related to the diagnosis: why did God make things so hard for me? God, please help me. Why did God make me this way? Why does God let bad things happen? Were reported as questions asked by the parents. And I think we as autistics tend to ask deeper questions and tend to insist on questions more, and we don't just say, boom, and it's answered, and we go on with our day. We really want a deeper question. And I think that's why, as adults at least, my sense is that few of the autistics are in the kind of social nicety kind of valley of religion. We're either atheists, and don't tell me you haven't seen those before, or we're serious about religion enough to at least try and go every week, even if we have psychological issues, we can't quite make it every single week, or physical issues or whatever. We try and go at least once a week. We don't have kind of that socially acceptable, 2 or 3 times a year attitude. We don't fall into that. We either kind of shift to one side or the other, because and a lot of that has to do with how we question and the logic we use there. And most parents who talked about positive social experience reported feeling welcome and accepted, and 2 parents reported that they no longer attend their former church because of these challenges, and 1 reported that their positive experience was going to another church which was more inclusive. An interesting thing that I have learned talking to a psychologist that works with autistic kids is she noted that they try and get kids into a social group, and the ones who go into a Christian social group are often better off because we are more inclusive than random secular ones, because we do see people better who might have challenges like that. And I think that that's a positive thing. There's also an issue of communication that's mentioned here, that sometimes parents will try and do stuff, but parents won't know. Trust me, I've worked in enough parish, like people didn't know what was going on, because people talk about organized religion, and one thing I can tell you is that the Catholic Church is supposedly the most organized religion in the U.S., but realistically, like compared to an even half decent company, we're completely disorganized. And I know that from experience. I mean, I was studying computer engineering beforehand, and so I have kind of a technical background. Thinking of the companies that I was applying to, summer jobs with, and compared to anything I see in the church, I'm like, yep, those companies are much better off. Even some that don't exist. I mean, I was looking at applying to Nortel, which went bankrupt like sometime in the last 20 years between then and now. It's they overinvested in one technology, and another company beat them to it, and they lost the market. They didn't get a huge bump from that, and then they just couldn't pay the bills. It was a good attempt, and it just failed. And here they mention about the importance of routine in prayer. Like an autistic kid will want, let's say these prayers every day, not, hey, let's just make it up all on our own, in that sense, I think for additional prayers, for a lot of us, it's kind of those, those kind of more scheduled prayers, and not just kind of, hey, let's pray, and we'll figure it out and we'll go with the flow. That's, for us, that's like, oh, no, please don't make us just like go with the flow. And it's going back to the question it says here that their autism spectrum children were 4 times like that question related to their own spiritual experience than those who are typically developing in that sense. And I think that does bring back the importance of questions for us. And finally here with the conclusion, the first 2 lines of the conclusion, I'm going to read them and then make a few comments and we will be done. Understanding the context, behavior, and beliefs of children with autism in the religious setting will enable people to meet the complex social, psychological, and spiritual needs of people with autism in this setting, i.e. the church and things like that. And I think that we do have to understand those things as a church, and I hope that, the type of things I'm doing, like these videos, are one of those stages. I still think that there's a lot to go, but I do think the church does have a lot of things in her favor, just her sense of charity, her sense of mission, her sense of reaching out and meeting people where they are. And so hopefully that's helpful to you all. If you like these type of things, I'm definitely doing more things along this line on this channel, talking about autism and Catholicism, autism and spirituality, prayer for autistics, liturgy for autistics, things like that. Give it a like, comment, or subscribe. God bless.